Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome to Tea Time History Chat Live with me, Philippa Lacey-Bruhl. A warm welcome to you. This is where we talk about people, places, events in British history. I'm here every week doing this live stream. And today we've got quite a few anniversaries this week, actually. So I've picked out a few that I thought you might like to talk about. Apologies, by the way, if you are joining me on YouTube or Facebook and saw that I'd scheduled it for tomorrow. Don't know why. Clearly, I thought Wednesday was the 12th. And it's not. We're here on the 11th of October. So thank you for joining me live. I'm streaming on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook. And you're very welcome here if you're listening live, and also if you're on the catch up and you're listening on the podcast, which you can grab on YouTube, and also the British History podcast on all the various platforms. If you want to know everything, where I am doing, whatever I'm doing, all the things that I do, then you can sign up to my Substack, which is the best place, philippab.substack.com, and you can then I send out links basically of everything I'm doing. So that's all good. So so let's get on with today. Hello, everyone. I can see you all joining. Welcome. Just as a reminder before we get going, that if you want some more live history, then tonight I am live with the girls doing History After Dark. That's Dr. Kat Marchant and Catherine Ibbotson, I should say, Ibbotson Brooks. So we are going live tonight. It's the roundup of the last three Gits that we've been discussing in the Deceased Gits series. So we'll be discussing, I think it's Uncle Norfolk, Queen Victoria's mother, and William the Conqueror. So they will be our people we're discussing later. So, but anyway, for my live stream today, I thought we'd look at some of the anniversaries that we've got. So we're going to be talking about the raising of, let me know if you can hear me okay, by the way, the raising of the Mary Rose. I did speak about the sinking of the Mary Rose in July on the anniversary of it sinking. So I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but there are a few things that I think are very interesting about the attempted salvage of the Mary Rose. For anyone who doesn't know, the Mary Rose was Henry VIII's, the flagship of his fledgling navy, and she was built only a couple of years into his reign, and she sank a couple of years before his reign ended. So she spans his reign. Deborah, thank you so much for the badges. Thank you, Deborah. You can just like Deborah, you can support me with badges on Instagram. You can support me with stars on Facebook and super chats and things on YouTube. Please, though, even just for free, it really helps if you hit the like button, if you hit hearts on Instagram. That all really helps as well, and obviously if you comment as well. So thank you so much. There's plenty of ways of supporting me for free, but obviously I am very, very grateful to anyone who feels like they can donate. It does help very, very much. So there's another way, of course, that you can support me, which means I can give back, and that's by joining my Patreon. And a lot of you already have. There are loads of different things you get in Patreon, including early access to historian interviews, the chance to ask historians your own questions. We have book club in there. We're currently voting on which books we're going to cover in 2024. You have extra photos and things like that I share when I'm out and about in places. You have discounts on online history festival tickets. So the Tudor's Online History Festival, which is coming up in November, you get a 10% discount on those ticket prices. You get all sorts. So, but I would like to give a shout out to Suan, Andrea, Char, and Vicky. They have all become patrons recently. So welcome very much to them. And this Sunday, everyone, so whether you're a Patreon or not, has access to the latest historian interview on my YouTube channel. It's with Nicola Tallis, Dr. Nicola Tallis, about Margaret Beaufort. And is she really the pious / power hungry woman that we're led to believe? And there's you might guess from the fact that that Nicola's written a book about her, and that I've wanted to interview Nicola about her, that there's far more to Margaret's story than you might think. We go through her marriages and how much she had input into her marriages. The, just also how ambitious was she really for her son Henry? When did that start? How did she have an influence on that? The risks she took. There is the chances that Margaret Beaufort may have been found out and accused of treason and executed for treason were really quite high. And Nicola goes into this in my interview with her. That will be available on Sunday on my YouTube channel and on the British History podcast. By the way, if you're searching for the British History podcast, this is one thing I didn't think of, but then it is the name of everything I do. If you just search British history, you get all sorts of brilliant podcasts, but they're not all mine, obviously. So if you're looking for my podcast, please look for the one with my face on the thumbnail. That's the giveaway. That's the one that I've done. So that interview with Nicola is actually already available to patrons. So again, another great reason for becoming a patron. And you can join at patreon.com/British history. But like I say, even if you're not a patron, that interview will go live on Sunday on my YouTube channel. And if you have signed up to my Substack, philippaB.substack.com, just check I've got that right, then yes, it is philippaB.substack.com, then you will get a link to the historian interviews as they go live. You also get a link to the podcast as it goes live. So you don't actually have to go searching for it at all if you do that. So that's all easy peasy, hopefully, for you. And the interview with Nicola is really good. I think you're going to enjoy it. And like I say, if you're a patron, you've already got it. And have a look at it. You get it ad-free and extended because Nicola's answering the Patreon's questions. Right. So this week, though, we're talking anniversaries. We have a few, and like I say, the Mary Rose is one that I'm going to go into in a maybe the most detail, but we've got a few to go through. The Mary Rose is raised from the seabed on this day in 1982, hence why I'm talking about it today. It's also the day that Henry VIII was created a Fidei Defensor, so defender of the faith. So just a little bit about that. It is the day that the regicides, so these are the people who signed the death warrant of, we're a few days before, so the 13th this week is the anniversary of where the first regicides, those who signed the death warrant of Charles I, began to be executed. And I have a favourite sort of ditty about that, so I will share that with you. And also we are only the day before, so tomorrow is tomorrow, we're the 11th. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Edward VI's birth at Hampton Court. So let me tell you about my recent visit to the room in which he was born. And unfortunately, his mother died 12 days later. So let's get on. Which one should we do first? We can do, because it's quite quick, Henry VIII's Defender of the Faith. Because what I found interesting about this one, so he's Henry VIII basically wrote a pamphlet. Afternoon, everybody. Hello, Emma. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I shouldn't pick out names because I don't get to everybody. But anyway, so Henry VIII, he writes a pamphlet defending the Pope. It's called the Declaration of the Seven Sacraments against Martin Luther, because Martin Luther has started to, well, he's pinned his 75 objections to certain ways that the church is working at this time, and Henry, good old pious Catholic Henry, decides to write a pamphlet in defense of the church. I don't think Martin Luther was trying to say, "We've all gone a little bit off track here. Let's get back on track." But anyway, obviously we know that that's not quite how it was accepted. Now, um, when of course we know Henry VIII then later, so this is 1521, October the 11th, 1521, Henry is conferred with this title of Fidei Defensor. And obviously we know then in the 1530s, Henry breaks with Rome, and he breaks from the Roman Catholic Church. And at that point, so Pope Leo X is the one who gave him the title. By this point, when he splits from the church, you have Pope Paul III who takes this title off him. But the king now is the head of the church in England. And so Parliament in 1540, I've read two dates, but I think it's 1546 because that's the Church of England's date. The Parliament give him the title back. So, and it has been a title that goes with our monarch ever since. And from the time of George the First, I think it is. Yes, George the First. You can actually see it on the coinage, on our coinage as well. So that's one anniversary from today. Actually, we've got a lot of Tudors, so let's do as well, because this ties in with some of my travels. Tomorrow is the birth date of Edward VI at Hampton Court Palace, and if you have been following me on Instagram, you will see that I was there in that room only a few days ago. Very, very fortunate that it's actually the third time I have been able to go into that room, because the room that Jane Seymour gave birth to Edward in is not on the visitor route. And it's actually a training room. It's used sometimes for the people who are the room guides and the actors, the interpreters who are at Hampton Court Palace. So it's used as their kind of changing room sometimes. So it's not an area that you can get access to. So good morning, Melissa. So I've been very, very fortunate that I have been in there 3 times so far this year, twice on tour. So it was wonderful that my tour groups in May and July were able May were able to get into Hampton Court. And my years seem to have been like, I'm condensing my years, but either way, Tracy Borman gave us a talk in that room. And I am a bit sad to say, it is Georgianified. Now, I wrote about this in my newsletter last week. The Georgians, I actually quite admire their external architecture. I quite like the symmetry. I quite like the organized look of it. But when it comes to the interiors, they are stark. They are stark. And unfortunately, Jane Seymour's bedroom has had the Georgian treatment, except the fireplace and the doorway. So yeah, Melissa's saying she got teary in that room. It is it's a sort of it's a emotionally charged room in that respect. It is it's somewhere that something significant has happened that we've talked about, but also it's the room in which Jane Seymour also died. So 12th of October 1537, Jane Seymour gives birth to Edward. And what was great and about my visit, and also I shared this the other day, the view out. So if you look out of the window, actually to the left, you'd see part of the Mary and William Palace, the colonnade. But if you look colonnade to the right, as you look out, you see the you see the astronomical clock that Henry VIII put there. So that's the tower there, and the Great Hall to your right. And you can't imagine that she could have been in that room and not watched the christening procession that processed through the courtyard. Um, yeah, so we've got Melissa, Becky, Linda. They've all been in this room with me in the last couple of years on various tours, and we are very lucky to be able to have got in there. Like I say, it's not on the visitor route, so um, um, yeah, people like they like my tour groups, and they like to take us to these places. So I'm very grateful. Um, but like I say, so the view is, as you can imagine, Jane seeing it. The fireplace is the same, and the doorway is the same. Everything else is really quite stark. There's another little fireplace put in. Presumably, the bigger one was covered up at some point. I don't actually know. I've never asked, but there is a little fireplace in there as well. So maybe that was put in as the working fireplace. I don't know. And it was only 12 days later that Jane Seymour succumbed to her postpartum infection and died in the same room. And of course, Hampton Court went from being a place joyous with the celebrations of the birth of christening of Edward, Prince Edward, who would become Edward VI, to a place of mourning when his mother dies. But so it's really special to be in that room. If you didn't see the pictures, check out my Instagram, or sign up to my Substack and have a look at the newsletter I did last week, and it's all on there. So all very very interesting. And of course, if you love the Tudors, let me see if I can segue smoothly into this. Just as a reminder, we have the Tudors Online History Festival coming up on the 17th to the 19th of November. And we have, I'm going to tell you, because we've got quite a few speakers and they are incredible. So we have Illyri Lynn talking about Tudor fashion, so the evolution of style at the Royal Tudor Court. Because if you think about what when you see in portraits of Henry VII, Margaret Beaufort, and say Elizabeth of York, right through to then, if you think about the end of the Elizabethan period, there's quite a change in fashion there for both men and women. So Illyri is going to be talking about that. Estelle Peronk is talking about Henry I and Catherine de Medici, which is she wrote the book Blood, Fire and Gold, which we've discussed before. She's called it The Pursuit of a Mother-Daughter Relationship, because that's really fascinating how Elizabeth I and Catherine de Medici interacted on that sort of level. Gareth Russell, who, of course, we're talking about Hampton Court Palace, he's just written the book The Palace, which is 500 years of history from the Tudors to the Windsors. I haven't got the exact title right there, but that's his book. And he's talking about Edward VI. So we just talked about Edward being born. Edward VI's best friend, he's a guy called Barnaby Fitzpatrick. And Gareth's talking about the rise, fall, and rise of Barnaby Fitzpatrick. Tracy Borman, the wonderful Tracy Borman, is talking to us about Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I. Kat Marchant has done a very interesting talk on Shakespeare versus the Puritans. So we've got some theatre in there. Dr. Joanne Paul is talking about the House of Dudley, just the women, and they are pivotal in the Dudley story. And Joanne, with her work for her book on the House of Dudley, was able to uncover a lot of their stories. Sorry, I've just realised I've missed loads of comments on Instagram. It had frozen. Sorry about that. My comments had. Hopefully I hadn't. James Clark is the seventh. So we've got 7 speakers. He's the 7th speaker. They may not come out in this order. I've still got to decide which order to put them out in. But he's talking about the dissolution of the monasteries, Henry VIII and the dissolution of the monasteries. If you can't make the festival live, 17th and 19th of November, then or you can't make all of the talks, don't worry, because all of the talks will be available until the end of January 2024. We also have a live speaker Q&A on the Sunday evening, which we're going to do an hour and a half. So you should get a chance to ask your questions. And the speaker panel is the speakers. So the speaker panel is Illyria Lynn, Tracy Borman, Estelle Peronk, Gareth Russell, Kat Marchant, Joanne Paul, and James Clark. Followed by Catherine and I doing a fun quiz. See what you've learned. See what you haven't learned. But it's just fun. It's just a really nice way to end the festival. Yeah, so you also get 10% discount on Tudor Places magazine. If you sign up, you get entry into the free prize draw. One person will win a ticket refund, so they'll get the price of their ticket back. One person will get an Amazon gift voucher for equivalent to about $15 or $15 and whatever that is in yours. Tracy Borman is donating an audible version of her book, Anne Boleyn and Elizabeth I. Illyria Lynn is donating a signed copy of her book, Tudor Fashion. And Joanne Paul is also donating a copy of her book, The House of Dudley, A New History of Tudor England. That's for UK only, unfortunately, with postage and being so expensive and unreliable, that is a bit of a constraint on these prizes. But there you go. There's quite a lot of prizes as well to be won. And remember, if you are a patron, you get so the tickets are £20, unless you're a patron, in which case they are 18. So yes, got Henry II and Catherine de Medici. Yes, that's right. That's the Catherine we're talking about. So if you want to grab your tickets, then please do go to the Tudors 2023.eventbrite.co.uk. So everyone, I thought I'd just take you through that. I just realised I've just been chatting about that for a while, but anyway, I think you're going to absolutely love it. I've been watching the videos in order to get them edited and ready, and yeah, you're going to learn a lot. It's cool. It's really very good. I'm very, very proud of it. So now let's talk Mary Rose Salvage. I don't know if any of you watched the raising of the Mary Rose on this day in 1982. I was only 3 years old, so I didn't watch it. But I've seen many videos since, and of course you have the Mary Rose finally being lifted from the seabed on this huge yellow, what would you call it, sort of cage, and then one of the supports snaps and the top of the cage seems to come down, and it looks like it's crushed the Mary Rose. Anyway, apparently it just had damaged one of the timbers or a couple of the timbers, and they were easily fixable. But wow, that was the culmination of 82. There was a guy in the 60s. Let me get his name. I really should tell you his name. Who decided, not Cradle, thank you, Doug. Decided that the Mary Rose couldn't possibly have been lost forever. This is what, there was sort of thought that the Mary Rose actually had been lost, and that is because of a 19th century attempt to, I was going to say to raise it. Actually, it wasn't. She was discovered again in the mid 1800s, and she June 1836, and fishermen in the Solent found that their nets were snagging on something. So no, you thought I was younger than you. Thank you very much. No, not if you saw me in real life. But yeah, so 1836. So nothing's been heard of the Mary Rose. Presumably, it's known about in local legend, maybe. There's been lots of wrecks in the Solent. Mary Rose is one of them. The site um, of the sinking maybe is lost. Anyway, but fishermen's nets start to snag, and so they um, they figure that there must be something down there, and that it possibly is the Mary Rose. Now, what it seems to be is they are far more interested in the monetary value of the salvage, than actually trying to save her. Or, I mean, it's a good job actually she's not brought to the surface, because the technology that's being required to preserve the Mary Rose, and she's now stable and preserved, um, that technology wouldn't have existed. So it's probably a good job that that they weren't actually trying to salvage her. But at that point, they did bring up some bits and some timbers. Um, they um, they brought up some of the ordnance from it, and all this has been um, lost. So, well, actually, I say all. I think there's something on display in the V&A, I think. Apparently a cannon in the Tower of London, which I didn't realise. So I'm going to have a look out for that next time I go. But a lot sort of was lost. So there's then a story. This is why I'm saying that it's incredible that someone decided they wanted to go and look for her. So a lot of the guns were so some of the guns were recovered. That's right. And then it says the site was abandoned in 1843. If you want more information, by the way, the Mary Rose website is brilliant. And then they go on to say, as the Mary Rose has been relieved of much of its salvage as could be recovered, the site was scheduled for demolition. Which is why I've titled this live on Instagram. But actually, I can't remember exactly what I titled it. But anyway, something about it being blown up. It's scheduled for demolition, literally being blown up, presumably so that it's not bothering the traffic in the Solent anymore, or the fishermen. So there are sources that say that it was destroyed, but there are other references that cast out on that, and so it's not actually sure whether it was attempted to. I'm presuming that, since as it did clearly still exist, that that they didn't try and demolish it. So yeah, and it's another 128 years until large timbers were seen again protruding from the seabed. So you've got a man called Alexander McKee, who in 1965 decides to start a project called Project Solent Ships. So I said there's multiple wrecks in the Solent, but he really did want to find the Mary Rose. And they used sonar scans and found sort of anomalies in the seabed, and then they you would not want to dive in the Solent unless you were looking for something specific. It's not like diving in, in the Mediterranean or the Maldives or something. I mean, I think they're very dedicated, and so he does this in the 1960s, and between 68 and 71, him and a team of volunteer divers go and try and find. Well, they go and explore the seabed around the Solent, and they do find three parts of the port. Is that right? On the 1st of May 1971. So they find evidence of Mary Rose in 71. They've been diving since 68. the when I first read a few years ago about the full story of the salvaging of the Mary Rose, the one thing that came across loud and clear was the tenacity, the dedication of the people involved to find her, and then to bring to save the artifacts on board, and then to bring her up. It's just incredible. So so they then set up a hello Martha. They then set up the sorry, I'm just reading the comments. I shouldn't. Yeah, so then set up a charity, because it's going to get very expensive. And the planning involved must have just been immense. You've not just got to plan for the for diving down and finding her, but then you need to plan for what you're going to bring up, how are you going to store it, who's going to store it, where are you going to store it, and then the ship herself to bring to the surface. That's and then what? So they set up this charity. It's got full-time staff. It's the patron, I should say, the president of it is our current King Charles. He was Prince of Wales at the time. He does do a dive down to the site as well in his younger days. And it took over 500 volunteer divers. And I think it's 19. I have the figure here somewhere. It's like 19,000 dives. Let me get this for you, because it's really incredible. So between 1979 and 1982, 500 divers made around 27,000 dives. 19,000 is the number of artifacts they managed to salvage. And they work in shifts so that they can cover the most, they can get the most done. Really amazing. So so she's brought up from the seabed and towed into Portsmouth dockyard. And she's towed at that point into a dry dock, and she has to have jets of water sprayed on her, because if the timbers dry out, they're going to crack. They're full of water. So if they start to dry out, you've got say caverns. You've got pockets which are going to be full of air instead of water. And of course, water gives some stability to things, to materials. So so there's that. And now if you're lucky enough to go, and I'm going to put the Mary Rose into a tour, because you can because I can arrange for us to go and see some extra bits that aren't on display. I'm very excited about that. So I've just learned about that. So I'm going to put her into a tour. But if you are lucky enough to go anywhere, you've been recently, she has a whole building to herself now. It's absolutely fantastic. So around the dry dock, they've built this purpose building. Over the time, I'm trying to think now what year it was when she was opened up to the air again. It's only a few years ago. So brought up in 82, 92, 200, over 30, maybe 30, 40 years, nearly nigh on 40 years. She is the drying process, and to stabilize her so that she can actually be opened up to the air. And 19,000 artifacts. And what I discovered today, which I hadn't realized, now this is quite shocking in an interesting way, is there's still part of her down there. Yes, and the Mary Rose sank in 1545, but she was salvaged on this day. She was brought up to the surface on this day in 1982. So there are still parts of the Mary Rose on the seabed. I didn't realize this, and the reason that I found this information is because there is advice to people using that part of the sea. People still operating there there's strict instructions about what they can and cannot do in that area. But yes, so apparently there's still significant remains of Mary Rose still buried in the seabed. More timbers uncovered and surveyed during the dive seasons in 2003, between 2003 to 2005, are still there. So some have been reburied under the sand, maybe for future generations to go and see. I mean, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize there was still some parts of the ship still down there. Um, she's very atmospheric when you go to visit her. The museum have done an amazing job, and yeah, there's something about it. There's something very, very. I want to say emotional, but I don't think emotional is quite the word I'm after. There's an energy anyway to the ship, and yes, 19,000 artifacts brought up, so not all on display. But they brought up everything from cannon through to wicker baskets. So all range of stability of materials. Materials, you just wouldn't expect something like a wicker basket, but of course, being buried in the mud and sand of the Solent had some um, preserving properties. so um, so it's really amazing. But that's not the, I mean, as well, I should say, I've jumped right to the Salvage. But if we go back, so we know there was a obviously there's been this attempt to find her and see what they could do with her, but from the 1960s, with a few people who have been incredible in this journey with her. And then the 19th century, there's this salvage operation, but really that's to try and get things of value. And then they want to destroy the site. Luckily, they didn't. But right back, we should say, right back to the time of the Tudors, straight away after she sinks on the 19th of July, 1545, they are trying to bring her up to the surface. And you have so yeah, Cherry, the decks, how small they are. A bit hard to tell actually. Oh yeah, the ships are a lot smaller. When you go to Portsmouth Historic Dockyard as well, I think it's definitely worth going to see the other ships. You have the Warrior there, and you have the Victory, HMS Victory, and you get an idea. Although they're later ships, you get an idea of what it would have been like to be on a warship as a sailor with the cannon, with your sort of living quarters being the exact same place as the cannon that you're in charge of. And yeah, really, so that's always worth doing as well. So yeah, so when the Tudors, oh, sorry, excuse me, when Mary Rose sinks, it's not unusual for ships to go down, and she doesn't sink. Well, either the waters are shallow. I heard different things. I don't know whether it's because the waters were shallow or because actually a ship has some buoyancy, even though they've gone down. So the masts are still visible above the waterline, and the Lord Admiral, who's John Dudley, so he features in Joanne Paul's book about the House of Dudley a lot, of course. He gives orders for salvage operators to come in, the people who this is their job, and they were going to raise the Mary Rose. And the way they did that is to put two cables underneath the ship, attached to two other ships. They would sail away, raise the Mary Rose up in the water so that she can be boarded, I presume, to remove some of the heavy items. The ordnance, by the way, it was worth the equivalent to like £2 million today, maybe more actually. And so it's not just a matter of the ship going down; they wanted the stuff off it. So anyway, so she would sort of be brought to the surface and then pumped out and raised to the surface of the water because she's not damaged. So it's the Battle of the Solent that she goes down, but she's not damaged. So actually, it's a writing of her, and she should be able to sail again. So this is an incredibly important warship, both in terms of what it says about Henry. You know, it's one of the first things he does as king is get three ships, yes, commissioned: the Mary Rose, this is off the top of my head now. Um, the Peter Pomegranate and what was the other one? There's another one. Someone can tell me. Um, oh, Jenna just said Peter Pomegranate. Yeah, there was another one there, wasn't there? I'm sure there was another one. I can't remember what happened to them actually. I can't remember what happened to them. Also, interestingly, just as an aside, if you have read about the Armada maps, or you saw my video on the Armada maps, or read my blog on the Armada maps, these ship names come up again and again. So when they lose a ship, the ship name you'll see later on, and some of these names that we recognise from Henry VIII's fleet turn up again in Elizabeth I's fleet. Anyway, so it's a symbol of Henry VIII's reign. It's his flagship. She's worth a lot of money, and everything on board is worth a lot of money. And it's not unusual, particularly for these ships to go down. So it should be a fairly run-of-the-mill operation. And so they are looking to bring her back to the surface. And it's fairly quickly. So she sinks on the 19th of July, and around the 3rd of August, so just a couple of weeks afterwards, they're looking to be bringing her back to the surface. And Charles Brandon writes to, who's he writing to? Can't remember who he's writing to, but he writes and he says, "Oh yeah, she's going to be out the water today or tomorrow. Off the righted, whatever, by today or tomorrow." So fully expecting her to be raised up. Lisa, would you know if there's any books about ships of this era? Oh, that's a very good question. There must be. Someone must have written a book about warships of this time. But I don't know about one. That's a very good question. And if any of you've read the book, what's the name of the book? I've lost my notes on this now. I don't want to say it. And yes, I do. Miranda Kaufman, that's it. On Black Tudors. There's a chapter about the Mary Rose in there, because later on they're still trying to salvage these all the ordnance and everything. They're trying to get it. And there is some, I think it's Venetian team who come over, Venetian boss, and then he has a team. And some of the divers are from Africa, or they seem to be of African origin. And the thought is that they learn to swim, and it's a thing that English sailors don't appear to have learned to swim, like as if it's a bad luck charm, as if it's kind of admitting that you might need to. So I don't know, that still sounds so bizarre to me. But anyway, that's apparently how it goes. So even though they've given up on getting the ship, they haven't given up on getting the ordnance. So the ordnance, the cannons and all these things that are worth quite a lot of money. And there's a team of 8 men: Jacques Francis, John Ico and George Black. I think they're all of African origin. Definitely Jack Francis is. And the reason we know anything at all about Francis is that he is a witness at a trial of his boss at this point. So his boss with the trying to raise the ordnance from the Mary Rose. That boss, Corsi, his name is. He's tried a few years later for stealing off another salvage site, and so Francis is brought in as a witness. So it appears to be because they live on islands with rocks. Presumably, there's lots of the story goes that there's lots of shipwrecks, and so salvage is a thing that they do, and they're just incredible because you before diving equipment. So they're diving down, they can hold their breath. They're just very, it's a skill. They're skilled at it. and so they're brought in. Um, so that's absolutely fascinating, 'cause it tells us a lot about, how people are wanted for their skill at this time. It's not there's not an issue with where you come from. It's probably an issue with what you believe. There's not an issue with where you come from. Um, and these men, have got jobs salvaging from ships, but unfortunately, they still didn't manage to get much up. I don't think. Um, so it's interesting that he turns up as a witness as well at a trial, because only free men could give testimony. And some people see this as an exception, but actually I haven't seen anything that says he was anything other than a paid employee of, or contractor. I suppose we'd call them contractors, of the salvage operation. But so the Tudors did make an attempt to get the Mary Rose up. They didn't just go, oh, there you go, never mind, lost another one. They did attempt to get her up. Because she should have been whole. Well, she would have been whole at that point. The French didn't. I think the French claimed that they had hit her, but with a cannon or whatever. But no, I think the overriding theory now is that she's sitting quite low in the water, and that on the on the turn she did, that water entered the lower gun holes. SJ has noticed my cushions. Thank you very much. You can't really see them on Instagram because it's blurred on my background, but they're bees. The bees. Philippa B. I have a bee on my ring as well. So so that's they're the anniversary stay. Next week I'm going to be talking about King John. And the reason I'm going to be talking about King John is next week is the anniversary in dying. But also this week, so I'll talk about these together. It's the anniversary of him losing all the crown jewels in the wash. So we'll talk about that as well. Lisa says if they'd raised her, the Mary Rose, then we may not have her today. That is that is a very good point. That is a very good point. So coming up tonight, as a reminder, History After Dark, it is the roundup week for the last 3 Gits in the Deceased Git series. So we will be ranking them, we'll be scoring them and putting them in the Deceased Gits League table. So please come along and you can put in your score for how. So we score them on what they were like in their personal life, their professional life, depending on who it was, what their legacy was, how gittish their legacy was. And then we ask the audience to score them on their culpability. How much were they actually in control of all of those things? So please do join us at 8:15 tonight on history.after.dark on Instagram and History After Dark on YouTube, because we'll be scoring the last 3, which were the Duke of Norfolk, Queen Victoria's mother, and last week we did William the Conqueror. So some interesting candidates. And like I say, next week I'll be talking about King John. So I'll be here, same time, same place. In the meantime, like I say, if you sign up to my Substack is free, by the way. You can support me on Substack, but don't want to complicate matters. It is where you can get a free newsletter from me each week, with a sort of mini blog, but also links to the historian interviews that have gone out and tours that have spaces, things like that. You can sign up to that at Philippa B, hence the B's on my cushion, philippaB.substack.com. Grab your tickets for the Tudors Festival. It is the Tudors 2023.eventbrite.co.uk. The tickets are £20 unless you're a Patreon on my Patreon. In which case you get the tickets at a discount. They're £18 and you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/British history. And if you love books and you want to discuss books with fellow geeks, then join Patreon and you're part of the book club. straight away. Right then, everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. And like I said, if you want to know more about the Mary Rose, please check out the Mary Rose Museum website. It's really, really good. maryrose.org, I think it is. But yeah, check that out. It's got loads of information about Mary Rose. And yeah, thank goodness we have her. Isn't it wonderful? So I will see you all tonight, hopefully, or next week. All right. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye bye. Bye, everyone.